Hey everybody, it's Mike Al with Savage Kingdoms role-playing game and Fire in the Head Productions. Thought I'd do another video in the series of the Savage Kingdoms of Astagonia. Actually, this will be the last video in that series. Today we'll be covering Gethrax and Zurog. So Gethrax was a realm sort of based as sort of a draconic realm, as it were, and Zurog is a hobgoblin realm. So hobgoblins in Savage Kingdoms are very similar to orcs, or more like Uruk-hai and Lord of the Rings, just to kind of get in everybody's head what I'm talking about here when I'm talking about these realms. So I'm just doing these two together as one video because there's not that much lore to them, at least in the books. I know a little bit more in my head, obviously, that didn't get published. But yeah, so we can just do both of these pretty quickly, I think. So starting with Gethrax, the realm of Gethrax. It is on page 317 of the core rulebook. Right there you go. This is the book of which I am referencing, the Savage Kingdoms 3rd edition core rulebook, which contains the continent of Astagonia, and which is kind of the European-esque continent. Whoa. So Gethrax, here I'll just read from page 317. This is the realm of Gethrax the Great, called Terran Gethrian in the She tongue, a great fire dragon allegedly residing in a vast lair in the midst of the Bloodrock Mountains. In his younger days, Gethrax forged a veritable empire comprised mainly of hobgoblin warriors and the occasional human cultist spy, and used military might and subterfuge to bring even greater treasure hoards into his fold, as well to bring even greater I just read that, as well as acquiring yet more fear and respect in the greater mortal world. In present times, his kingdom, quote in quotes, is dwindling, for some say the great worm slumbers for moons at a time now, but the power of his name is still a reckoning force. All right, so as you can see, that's just really just one paragraph. That's really all that's in the book. So I'll elaborate a little bit more. So Gethrax, as mentioned in the top of the paragraph, that's his draconic name. It's probably much longer, some believe. Only a few would know for sure that would know his true name. But his shortened dragon speech, or what do they call it? The draconic name. It's really called dragon speech in Savage Kingdoms, actually, is Gethrax. Whenever you see AX on the end of a lot of my draconic names have AX on the end, that's kind of a nod to some old dragon lore, and also this just Savage Kingdoms lore. So it actually means mighty. So Gethrax means roughly like fire, mighty fire. So his she name is Terran Gethrian. So the she, which also means roughly. So if I can remember what my she, Terran Gethrian. Terran is Terran Gethrian is fire. Yeah, no, sky, actually, sky. Something like Great Skyfire, a great fire from the sky, which makes sense because he's a flying beast. I think that's it actually. So because Terran means heavens or sky in my she tongue, which is fairly similar to Tolkien's Elvish, particularly Quenya. Right. So what else can I add to Gethrax? So what else? Let's break it down a little bit more. So there was no map, but Gethrax is, speaking of his realm, he calls it Gethrax because dragons are very self-centered in this setting, and that's fairly typical lore in many other fantasy campaigns as well. They consider themselves gods, really. They don't really have deities, they don't really believe in such things. They might believe in demons and devils from the netherworld and overworld, but even that's rare, and even then they still think they're far superior, especially when they're older and more powerful, and have acquired much knowledge and treasure. So when they do get older, however, so they sleep longer, which I think the paragraph mentioned. It's kind of a clunky paragraph, actually. As I read it, I'm like, wait a minute. I thought it was sort of well written, and then I read it again, and it's like not so well written. Anyway, so when dragons get older and presumably larger, their scales get heavier, and kind of like everybody in real life, we get a little out of shape. Maybe we have to sleep a little bit longer. So they might sleep several months at a time. I think it says in his younger days, he was very active. So as they get older and wiser and but not quite as mobile, they will many drakes or dragons or worms will I say many. There's not many left in the world. They're very rare. But particularly Gethrax or Gethrain and also Volathrax, the great ice dragon of the north, they will attract these draconic cults for a couple of reasons. So the cultist people essentially worshiping dragons want to know their secrets. They want to serve a powerful dragon, right, and maybe gain some of the great treasure that he's hoarded, or better yet, gain some of the secrets that the dragon has hoarded of dragon magic, or whatever great secrets that the dragon might be able to teach them. Not really knowing that most draconic magic comes from within them. There's not that much to teach, but as the dragon gets older and collects a treasure hoard, and we're talking a dragon here that's lived about 500 years, so half a millennium. Um, he's gathered lots of knowledge, things that he could teach, a lot of forbidden lore and lost lore and that kind of things. In return, though, so the dragon, what does the dragon get out of a cultist or a cultist spy, as I worded it in that awkward paragraph? Is that these cultists can be used for spies? They're sort of the ears and eyes and nose and mouth and the senses of the dragon in the outer world. So as the dragon gets older and it's sleeping longer, it needs little humans and in some cases hobgoblins and other humanoids that are often kind of power hungry to go out into the world and sort of be spies and the ears and eyes and information gatherers of the dragons as they sleep and slumber. Also, as they get older and more renowned, more dragon slayers are after them. More kingdoms come together to drive the dragons off. Which is why Gethrax lives deep in the Bloodrock Mountains, which is the second highest. It's actually the longest mountain range in Astagonia, which is the eastern or western continent of the Savage Kingdom's known world. The highest mountains are the Iceclaw Mountains to the north, but they're not quite as long. They're pretty close. So both mountain ranges are pretty mighty. So Volathrax, the Ice Dragon, the famous or infamous ice dragon, who some say they haven't seen him in a while. Some say he might have actually died. Lives in the Iceclaw Mountains somewhere. He's changed his lair a couple times once people figure out where they are. Dragon slayers and such, the dragons very wisely move them. Whereas Gethrax, the guy we're talking about here, or Gethrain, lives in the deeper mountains or the higher mountains of the Bloodrock Mountains. The Bloodrock Mountains are called the Bloodrock Mountains because of their reddish sheen, which people in the world associate with blood. From a scientific standpoint, it probably means there's a lot of iron content in those mountains. So the ice claws, on the other hand, are called that because they're for the north. Almost all of them are snow capped. Most of them, some of the higher ones, all year round, even in summer. So just a little side note on that. In present times, his kingdom is dwindling, for some say the great worm slumbers for moons at a time now, but the power of his name is still a reckoning force. So yeah, he just these draconic cults kind of pop up every so often. They'll get destroyed or thrown down, or people will lose interest, or maybe the dragon even eats them because the spies failed Gethrax. Speaking of which, a little dragon psychology. Dragon lore is not super different in Savage Kingdoms and a lot of standard fantasy, but I will note a couple of things that are different. First of all, and some people that have played the game already know this, and I've probably mentioned in other videos, dragons are actually asexual in this setting. They are without gender, or so they're actually both genders. So they are able to, each dragon is able to lay eggs. And the reasoning behind that, just to give a little designer writer note where I sort of came from that, they come from an age. They're so ancient and they're so unusual that they're kind of they're almost from an age before gender was even a thing, if you might want to think about it like that. So they're neither and both, I guess we should say. Anyway, in any case, so any dragon, when it gets old enough, is capable of laying several eggs. Usually only one or two survive. Predators might grab a hold of some. Sometimes the births don't go well. Some of that is because the age of dragons was thousands of years ago. We're now in the age of man. Some scholars believe that dragons just aren't. The environment itself and the known world is just not really quite conducive to dragons anymore. It's more perhaps mankind has polluted the air a little too much. Magic also has waned since the age of the dragon, so dragons aren't really part of the natural world in some ways anymore. So it's very sad, but also very hopefully very compelling in a storytelling sense. So some things to kind of keep in mind there. As I mentioned, Gethrax, the realm of Terran Gethrian, he of great fire, or fire from the sky, as the She would call him. All right, I think it's enough about Gethrax. So I'll move on to part 2 of the video, which is Zurog. Zurog is a Hobgoblin realm. It appears on page 337 of the Gazetteer chapter of the core rulebook, which I just showed you a few moments ago. So here we go. All right, so that's Zurog. That's a map of Zurog. As you can see, you can probably see the writing there. Also located in the Bloodrock Mountains. So Gethrax, I'm trying to remember in my head how it goes. Here, I'll try to show you guys the entire map of the continent so you can kind of see where it is. It's not indicated on the greater map. So anyway, if I recall, Gethrax is slightly north. The Terran Gethrian's realm is a little further, sort of northwest of Zurog, which sits a little more southeast in the Bloodrock Mountains. Both are located kind of in the central of the mountain range, but they are separated by, it's probably good, let's see, probably good 150 miles or so. All right, so here I'll read the text really quick. Again, it's only a paragraph. This is Zurog. A very powerful hobgoblin realm said to be in the middle heights of the Bloodrock Mountains, a realm growing in numbers and effectiveness as the elder Werem Terran Gethrian nears a mortal death and his once great influence wanes. The black goblins of Zurog often raid into west central Lorenthia, or daring forays into the elf lands of Lithalor, as a powerful warlord named Mordag drives this militant state further toward conquest, blood, and glory. That's right, it's all about hobgoblins conquering and all that stuff. They're rightful place in the world. That's my hobgoblin accent. It's terrible. So, as you can see, Zurog is the hobgoblin name. Sort of harsh, sounds very hobgoblin, all that sort of stuff. Black goblins is kind of a another term for hobgoblins. So they're just kind of referred to as they're sort of not to get too into, but like sort of their skin's darker or whatever. Their armor is also darker. Usually, they like to wear blacks and dark red, so they're kind of referred to offhandedly as black goblins, but really they're hobgoblins. And hobgoblin, to kind of go back to the old English word for hobgoblin, it means devil goblin, and that's another thing they're also called, devil goblin. So yeah, it's a little hobgoblin lore there for you. So this, and to go further deeper into the lore, so this group of hobgoblins kind of gathered to worship Terran Gethrian, as we just talked about, in his realm of Gethrax, and they formed their own sort of kingdom. So they eventually came here being given power by Terran Gethrian instead of trying to destroy him, like many hobgoblins. Well, they're quite martial, they're quite warlike and all that stuff. In this case, they tried to appease Terran Gethrian when they found him, and Terran Gethrian, in their first encounter, actually did turn sort of violent, and he destroyed several dozen hobgoblins. And the hobgoblins, instead of fleeing, because they were known to, they will seldom surrender or run. They almost always die in combat. In battle, they decided that they stopped, and they were like admiring the power and strength of Terran Gethrian. So and this is several hundred years ago. So they kind of hung around to kind of be his, they struck a bargain and sort of hung around to be his eyes and ears and sort of the cultist spies, as I mentioned. Now, the black goblins, or the hobgoblins of Zurog, were not quite like cultists per se. They kind of were, and maybe some of them consider they were. But in this case, they were really just the armies of Terran Gethrian. So you might consider them a cult, but really it was more like an armed military force. So this was Gethrax, or Terran Gethrian's militant arm in the world, in the mortal world. Since again, he's getting really old. He doesn't fly out very much. Whenever he does, he's so huge. Unless he stays in like completely barren areas in the mountains, and there are quite a number, he'll be seen. If he flies too far east into the edge of the Lorenthian Empire, or too far west into Esmondos, or perhaps even to Kimrith, or maybe even as far as up to Brithia. he might be spotted. And though his wrath can be great, and he's more than capable of taking out an entire village, town, perhaps even a city, with his wrath. And if he was really hungry enough to do so, or there was a great treasure he was seeking, he might do that. But for the most part, he would prefer to stay low and let other people do that for him, because it's just too great of a risk. He's too big of a target, despite how powerful he may be at this point in his life. I think that'll about do it. Nice. Oh, wow, that's a record for a video. It's just over 15 minutes. Let's see if I can... Here, I'll show you guys, just to pad the video out a couple more minutes. I'll show you a map. And again, if you have the core rule book, you have all this stuff. But here's a map of Astagonia, the western continent. So you can kind of see in the middle of the screen there, that's the Blood Rock Mountains. They range primarily north to south. They go all the way down into Gorgotha, which has its whole thing, its whole bit of lore, which actually just triggers. You know what? I was going to make Gorgotha its own video, but I think I'm just going to tag it onto this one. So there we go. I'll change that in the title. So this video, go back to correct to the opening statement. This video will be about Zurog, Gethrax, and Gorgotha. Why not, right? We're at 16 minutes. We might as well do it. Because Gorgotha, is a fairly, it's a very major part of the lore of the world, but again, the entry in the Gazetteer section is not particularly large about it. So, all right, so what is Gorgotha, shall we say? And you saw it there on the map. And here is the inset map of Gorgotha, right there in the middle there. So it's in the very tip, the very peninsula of the Blood Rock Mountains as they flow into to southwest into the Sunset Sea, which is another name for the Great Eastern Sea. So Gorgotha, here I'll just read this. It's only a couple paragraphs. This vast and mountainous region exists south of Ismondos, west of the Laurenthian Empire, and north of the Sea of Pridonis and the Pridonian Isles themselves. It is a place steeped in dread and mystery, for as ancient tales would have it, Gorgotha was once the rocky and mountainous Badland, where the stillborn god Gorgothon allegedly washed ashore after he was cast from Rodon, the legendary island of the gods. As the story goes, the fallen god came unto the forlorn coastlands of Gorgotha, which took its name later from the banished deity, where instead of expiring, he increased. Gorgothon created fell and horrible creatures here, often part human and part beast, veritable demons born of the mortal world. These beings came to be known as Gorgons, or beasts of Gorgothon, and they would seemingly exist only to plague mankind with their wickedness and brutality. Gorgonic creatures are of many varied types, but in present-day Gorgotha, there is thought to be mainly manticores, minotaurs, medusae, chimeras or chimerae, and harpies. But in truth, there are doubtlessly many others. In fact, perhaps the most dreadful dragon of the past millennium, Gethrax, we just talked about him, nice segue, or Terran as the Sidhe name him, is said to lair in the north-central parts of the mighty Blood Rocks, the principal mountain range of Gorgotha. Some say that a great hobgoblin nation, it says nature, typo, nation can be found here, perhaps in service to the fell worm. We just talked about that Zurog. So that's kind of why I wanted to include that at the end. A, because the video was a bit short, but B, because they all sort of segue together. They're roughly in the same geographical feature. So just to kind of unpack some of that, right? Because that's a lot of stuff. So Gorgotha, named after Gorgothon, who was said to be the stillborn god. He was the 8th god of Rodon, although some Pridonian lore say there were possibly other deities as well, but there were only like 8 sort of named ones or names that have survived into current history in the Savage Kingdoms known world. So the 7 main gods, such as Pridonis and Atores and Sardona and Lucia and Romega, etc. Those were the primary deities. So this 8th god came into the world, apparently was stillborn, and some stories go, and they cast him into the sea. So from the Isle of Rodon. Rodon was once the island of the Pridonian gods, right? At the time, the Rodonite gods. For the people of the area were known as the Rodonites, and which would later become the Pridonians, because there was this great island called Rodon that was the island of the gods. So the people kind of took their name from that. So anyway, just a little bit quick lore. So this deity became born to Pridonis, and some might say Sardona. In some bits of the Pridonian mythology, Sardona is the wife of Pridonis. Um, in others, he's like a daughter. So, and Romega is actually the god, the mom, the goddess who gave birth to Gorgothon. Most agree it was probably Romega, goddess of mystery, very ancient, very symbolic of such things. Even though Sardona is a goddess of agriculture and growth, and to some minor degree childbirth, that would kind of make sense. Romega is the mother of mystery, and she almost represents the ancient female presence in the universe, kind of the all-encompassing blackness or void before the light came, which might be considered like Atori's, the sun god, or something like that. So he would be called the stillborn god because apparently he was born dead. They cast him into the sea. His body, as it were, his mortal form, drifted to the shores of Gorgotha, which means it would have drifted north many, many miles. Most people don't really understand where Rodan, if it even existed, really was, but they think it was just south of the modern-day Pardonian Islands, very close to the equator, actually, and therefore pretty far west of Mezca. So anyway, his body supposedly went ashore to Gorgotha, was washed ashore. He was supposedly, dead, but apparently a being came by, and the story is different in the mythology. One says it was an old hag or hag-like crone or wise woman who nursed him back to life. Another said it was a demon, a demonic creature that had the power to respark life. Very rare in a demon, by the way, but more of an angelic thing. In any case, so he regained life, possibly, or maybe it was just I mean, he is a divine blood. Maybe he just came back to life himself after being rescued from the water. And so there he tinkered in Gorgotha. He kind of created his own realm and sort of named it somewhat after himself because, he was called Gorgothon, which means father of the Gorgons. And then he tinkered with life because it's a lot of the lore in Savage Kingdoms is very similar to, say, Middle Earth, where true evil can't create life, but it can corrupt life. It can take something that already exists and kind of tinker and corrupt it. And so that's how he created the Gorgons, the Minotaurs, and the Medusae, and the Chimera, and the other creatures, the Hydra, or Hydrae, or Hydras. So a quick note on Gorgons. I know you probably already know this already, some of you, or you've seen it in the lore and some other videos. So Gorgons are their own category in Savage Kingdoms. I know in Greek mythology, a Gorgon was like, there were 3 Gorgons, right? So one of them was Medusa, personal name. And there were 2 others I can't recall. I used to be spot on with that Greek mythology and Norse mythology and stuff. But anyway, you know where I'm coming from. So in Savage Kingdoms, it is considered a creature type, a type of creature, and it's generally an aberration. Anything that's part man, part some other creature. Sometimes it's several creatures put together, so therefore harpies and minotaurs. Another way of thinking of it in the real world sense is that almost any kind of creature that might be from Greek mythology would fit into if they exist in SK, would fit into the category of Gorgons. Not always true. There's several unique to this setting creatures that are Gorgons as well. A few, I'd say more than a few. There's a fair dozen actually or so. What else can I mention about Gorgotha before we close out the video here? The Medusa dragons it talks about. I think that's it. I mean, honestly, I don't want to beat a dead horse, as it were. So, yeah, that's it. So, in a nutshell, really quick, just to kind of summarize the video. Gethrax, powerful red. I almost said red dragon. I almost gave it a D&D thing. It is a fire dragon. He's not necessarily red, although it is said his scales are kind of a reddish gold, almost like a brass or something. Although as he's gained in age, his scale colors have actually kind of changed a little bit. So anyway, Gethrax, realm of Terran-Gethrian, the great fireworm of the Bloodrock Mountains, and his cultists that have kind of gathered around him. The second one we covered was Zurog. Zurog was the Hobgoblin nation or realm, several tribes that came together, led by Mordag, who in your current campaigns should still be alive. I mean, he's a hobgoblin. He could have easily been killed in some horrible, violent activity by now, but in the, I guess, official canon, he's supposedly still alive. Up to you as a storyteller and game master. That originally came there to kind of worship Gethrax, and then really just kind of became its own sort of semi-organized Hobgoblin kingdom. And then lastly, we just covered, kind of on a whim, Gorgotha. Gorgotha, of course, being the realm of Gorgothon, where he washed ashore and sort of created or corrupted the race of Gorgons, of all these varied types that still plague the world, and culminated. I wouldn't say culminated because they're still around, but there was a big thing called the Gorgon Wars, which I've barely alluded to in the lore. I kind of want to leave that open for game masters to interpret it. But in the sort of the canon, that happened like 13 years ago, wasn't that long ago. As we enter a new age of the Savage Kingdoms known world. So anyway, there's a big outpouring of Gorgons that came rushing out of the Blood Rock Mountains. Most of them are out of Gorgotha, and raided into Laurentia and eastern Asmondos, and reached all sorts of, reached all the way up into southern Eridorn. And in between the Eridorians and Laurentians, who sort of came in, there were other nations and mercenaries and other troops that came in, but the two primary kingdoms that kind of overthrew the Gorgons and the Gorgon War 13 years ago was the Laurentian Empire and the Eridorn. So they actually had and now they're kind of at odds with each other. Amazing how just 12, 13, 14 years will do to things. So I think that's it. So thanks for hanging in there, guys. And this is the final video in the Savage Kingdoms of Astagonia series, as it were. I might start a new series, assuming I can get more people to watch these. It's starting to pick up a little bit. I do appreciate you guys watching these videos and liking them and sharing them with people. It's still, a very small channel right now, but I do see some little sparks of growth. So maybe it'll be worth keep doing this. So if I keep doing this stuff, and I most likely will, I'm probably looking at doing the Savage Kingdoms of the East, since the Savage East book is now out, so I can cover some of those human and non-human realms that would be found on the continents of Imanju and Hassan and Mezca and Ragnagard. So, all right, well, thanks for hanging in there, guys. Keep playing SK, keep doing role-playing games, and I will talk to you guys again soon, and Happy New Year.